We first listen and then we speak. And tonight we have a very interesting subject and topic, and we're going to deal with the church and politics. The church and politics. I know Uganda, we are in for a very hot political season towards the end of this year and come next year. And everybody is looking at politics, politics, politics. I will not be delving into what politics is all about, but the fact of the matter is that everybody is a political animal in one way or another. Politics affects us. Politics affects the economy. It affects every single aspect of life. And that's why tonight, we are busy with this particular topic of the church and politics. And tonight we have our guests. We are honored to be with Dr. Jimmy Spire Ssentongo, who is a philosophy teacher in Uganda Marathon University and even at Uganda Makerere University. He's a good cartoonist. I think his hands are always finding a way of how to put something. And art is very, very important to life because he who cannot even read, at least he has the ability to read and see a picture. So he has the cartoonist in him. I don't know whether it's part of his, that's that. But he's equally a columnist and who writes in several papers, several journals and everything. Of course, as somebody who's a philosopher or a philosophy teacher would expect that. Dr. Jimmy, you're most welcome.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure being here.
Yes. What is our starting point? Jesus said, render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God. We're in a country, we're in a world where politics, as I've said, is quite very, very pertinent in our lives. And often we hear politicians, all those in the political arena saying, the church, keep your boundaries. Render to God what you are supposed to. You are not for Caesar. And they forget that even they are quoting the words of the Bible, whose authority the church has over. To render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to render to God what belongs to God. Just for purposes of a background, Uganda has come from far. Throughout the colonial times, we had, in one or another, turbulences, and the church was coming into politics. What its role was, maybe you help us to know. And up to now, the church is still talking. Is the church supposed to be in politics? Are they two different worlds? Even hardly, I think, on the Martyrs' Day, the president was reminding the congregation that was listening to him that please restrict yourselves to where you belong to. So, hence this important topic, the church and politics. So, is the church supposed to be engaged in politics? And if so, you tell us under what circumstances and up to what extent. Yes, Dr. Jimmy.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's quite a broad question, but the starting point would be maybe not to answer it in very general terms.
Yes.
If we are asking whether the church should be involved in politics, first of all, what is the church? And then what's the role of the church? I think it's upon understanding that then we can talk about whether it should be involved in politics. If we look at the church as, of course, I know there could be several definitions and several ways of understanding it, given that even the church is not one particular entity. When we talk about the church, we mean all, at least Christian denominations. Yeah, but it is a form of expression of people's beliefs in God, at least Christian beliefs in God. And along that, you often have the institutions that come along, maybe the Catholic Church, Protestant, Orthodox, and yes, it's a very long list. But all that these institutions are supposed to do, and especially I'm looking at the institutionalized religions, the churches, because we can't talk of the church without mentioning institutions. But if you look at all of them, it's about trying to bring people to God. It's about mediating the relationship between people to God. That's why, in most cases, what the church is telling us about is how we ought to behave, how we ought to relate to each other, how we ought to relate to the Creator. Now, if that is the role of the church, then the next question would be, what does the Creator want us to do?
Exactly.
That Creator, that the church is here to mediate the relationship between us and Him. Now, the reference, of course, the primary reference will be the Bible. That all that He wants us to do is stipulated in the Bible.
Stipulated, yes.
Yes, and then you look at the 10 Commandments, for instance. So, if I don't want to go to the greatest commandment, love each other, love yourself rather love others or everyone as your neighbors, you love yourself. But if we break it down to the 10 commandments, you see that those commandments are basically about everything in life. They don't really leave out anything. Now, after you have looked at what the church is supposed to do in view of what the God through the Bible tells us to do, then the next thing would be, what is politics about?
What is politics all about? Yes.
Now, once you look at what politics is about, especially in terms of managing power or using power to deliver services, using power to serve people, then you ask yourself, and this is power in a form of representing people. That's what we are talking about.
Yes.
Now, when you look at the two, where is the line? You would hardly see the line. There could be some sort of a line in terms of where each one stands in playing their part, but ultimately they are all serving the same people. You, for instance, you will talk about government having to deliver services, having to mediate the delivery of social services, health, education, and all that. And then the church preaching, but what does the church preach about? They'll talk about love one another, the sins, the list of sins, theft, what. You realize that all of them are interrelated, that you cannot talk about a spiritual person or a healthy mind that is not in a healthy body, as it's often said.
Yes.
Mens sana in corpore sano, the Latin statement. A healthy mind should be in a healthy body.
Yes.
So the church cannot preach about spiritual matters without caring about the body. Second, even in governance, what you're doing is delivering services to people, whereby if you don't do that, those are sins. If we put it in terms of sins, it is a sin to steal. So if you steal public funds, does it cease being a sin?
No.
So should a religious leader talk about it or not?
He's supposed to talk.
If you touch another person, isn't it a sin?
It is a sin.
So shouldn't the church talk about that sin? Yes, so the question shouldn't really be about whether the church is supposed to talk about those things, but why the church is often gagged from talking about them.
Yes.
Because what will show you the motive is when the church is talking about other things that do not touch power, they said, okay, it's okay, you're doing your work. Or when the church is actually singing praises for those in power, it is okay. Even church leaders will be given positions in government. So if we are saying that we should draw a line between what is for Caesar and what is for what belongs to God, why do you get those who are supposed to serve God and give them positions in government? We have had priests in government. We have had sheikhs. We have had people who hold different religious positions in government. Why should they hold them? Why aren't they also reminded that they should go back and serve God? But often we know it that when you're talking about something that one doesn't want to hear, they'll find a way of silencing you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Spire. Now, what we are trying to come up with, it seems to be that the church is not supposed to be simply an observer, but supposed to be an active participant into the service of humanity. much as this belongs in the spiritual realm and the political realm. Now, that's why I was saying that. Up to what extent? Because it seems the dividing line is so thin, so thin. Now, we are talking about, whenever you're talking about politics, you start with the word power, authority, power. Maybe they may be interchangeably used, but now we are talking about power. When it comes to spiritual matters, the politician will say that's a spiritual issue, and the church will say sacraments, not politics. You're not supposed to intervene. But now, when it comes to the other way around, the spiritual man into the governance issues, there is supposed to delve into. So exactly up to what extent it still comes back? Are we supposed to be observers or active participants into the political life of any country?
Yeah, it depends on what we mean by active, because even by speaking, you're active. If by active you mean whether the church leaders should participate in elective politics, maybe even stand for positions, perhaps that would be something else. But in the sense in which I understand it, church leaders are supposed to be active participants in politics. For me, the line would be what they should do and what they shouldn't do in their active participation. And again, the guiding principle should be, what does the church say? What does the church teach? So a church which is preaching love should not participate in a way that promotes hatred. Shouldn't participate in a way that promotes all that is condemned to be seen. A church should not participate in a way that victimizes those that do not believe in what the particular religious leader stands for. I think it is in that sense that we are a secular state. The reason why Uganda is secular, it's out of that understanding that we belong to multiple denominations.
Yes.
That we should have the freedom to worship, whereby whether you're a Christian, a Muslim, you enjoy your liberty to worship for as long as you don't interfere with my own liberty.
Your liberty. Yes.
So the church should not come into politics to interfere with other people's liberties. Sometimes we have had debates where you've had some religious leaders saying that for us as this, or for us as Catholics, for us as Muslims, which is okay to express their view, but if you're going to impose it on others, that becomes a problem. But if you're talking about things that are in line with what is constitutional, our constitution talks about the role of leaders, talks about the role of government. So for a religious leader to insist or to emphasize that leaders should play those roles, that is not crossing the line. So for me, the line should be in terms of what goes outside the constitution, or a religious leader playing a divisive role. And divisive should also be defined, because at times a religious leader might come in to tell you that you're doing wrong, and then you respond, you're dividing people. You're attacking me because I belong to this party. Yeah, which is just a way of silencing. Because in such an instance, look at what the religious leader has spoken about, and whether that is something that can be raised by religious leaders. Now, this rhetoric that is often played, and the game of saying that, oh, if you're talking about what I'm doing, then I should also be free to come to baptize. I think that is a form of blackmail, because in the case of baptism, the case of the sacraments, officiating over sacraments, that is something very specific.
Yes.
Which is not the case with someone who is in charge of a hospital and they have stolen funds. I'm telling them stealing funds is the wrong thing. So for them to respond by saying that, for me, I'm not baptizing people, you should also not interfere. The church leaders are also taxpayers at the same time. Church leaders are the same people who are counseling those that you're denying these services. We will go to them sick and with all these problems that emanate from sickness, and they have to deal with them. But also remember that certain deprivations that come from government not playing its part can lead to sin. If, for instance, I'm so destitute, so deprived of means of survival, that might push me into stealing.
Yes.
Which means that the one who has pushed me into destitution is pushing me into a sin, and the religious leader who is supposed to collect people from sinfulness or to guide them away from sinfulness should be concerned about everything that is pushing them into sinning. So you cannot say that such a religious leader should not talk about such things. But the other important observation to make is these secular leaders are often quick to point out when they are challenged that leaders come from God. And they will quote the Bible to remind us that leaders come from God.
Romans chapter blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, let's grant that that is true. Leaders come from God. What does God send them to do? That would be the next question. Does God send them to steal? And if they are sent by God, are they sent by God above religious leaders? And where, because I would imagine that if they are sent by God and they are admitting, then the religious leaders who are also serving God would be concerned about these ones who are sent by God and what they are doing. Are they really doing what God wants to be done? Yes.
Now, Dr. Spire, that brings us to something very important concerning the prophetic role of a church.
Yeah.
Now, when you read the Bible, for example, in the book of Kings and I think Samuel, you see Prophet Nathan admonishing King Saul, King David, or something wrong. And now the question would be, how does the church, how is it supposed to play its prophetic role without necessarily aligning to a particular, say, political party and remains prophetic to play its proper role?
Now, I wouldn't really say I'm speaking for the church, but in my view, even the idea of non-alignment is problematic. The church should remain neutral. I don't agree with that. Because, the problem with neutrality, it's that even when I see that a certain political party is doing wrong things, I should remain there. Neutral. I'm neither here nor there. I'll only speak, but I remain there. Where the church or a religious leader sees that a certain political party, for instance, has totally gone off track, I think it's part of the prophetic role to ally with those who are pushing for that that party to be removed. Yes. And we've seen that in the past, actually, involving even those who are in leadership now. Cardinal Nsubuga was one of those that helped President Museveni to come into power. Why would he do that? Is that partisan or it is not? It is partisan, but I would support it because if the church has seen that a certain party or a certain government has totally gone off track, they are not doing what they are supposed to do, should they just watch? Should they simply say that for us, our role is like that of a referee? I'll just talk, but I will not side with anyone. Where, for instance, those who are trying to correct what is wrong come to you asking for assistance, what do you do as the church?
Are you supposed to just keep mum? No way.
Yes, so neutrality, just like in other areas outside the church, I don't agree with neutrality. People have asked me, no, but you're a commentator, you're an academic, you're supposed to be neutral. I tell them I'm not neutral, because neutral would also mean that where there is injustice, I remain there just as a spectator. That is not that's not my position. I will take a position which I can justify, which I can defend. And I think even in the case of the church, like in some instances, we've seen leaders actually actively encouraging people to vote so and so. In fact, if politicians have gone to churches when they are campaigning, yes,
and that's where we're
speaking for endorsement, and when they go to churches, they'll ask religious leaders to support them. So what are they looking for there? if they're saying religious leaders
You're
should
not
not be
supposed to
part.
meddle into politics.
But
Yeah.
a religious leader who is close to the people, because many of them are often, or ideally, they are supposed to be close to the people. They know many of these are those who are offering themselves for leadership. So if this crook has come to me and this other relatively upright person, they are seeking for my endorsement, should I remain in neutral and say, let the people choose, and not even guide the people that, no, do not vote that such and such a person? There are instances in history, for instance, the times of Hitler. Should the church have remained neutral to say, no, we are not, we are neither Nazi, neither those who are fighting the Nazis. We are sitting here on the fence. So we'll condemn the wrongs, but we are not going to take part.
In actual fact, when you brought the issue of Hitler's time, I think one of the issues that was addressed to the church that it didn't talk enough, much as it talked. It didn't speak enough.
Yeah.
And the church tried to justify to say that up to this level, we try to save the Jews, we try to do it. But now, let's go back to our local setting. I can put the setting of the 1960s, where we had Archbishop Joseph Chiwanuka, who was the Metropolitan of Uganda then in the Catholic Church. And there were issues of, with all due respect then, of the KYs, that was Kabaka Yeka, and then other issues. And I can quote the context. Archbishop Chiwanuka said, I cannot keep mum. I cannot keep silent when I'm seeing that there's something is going wrong. Because I know once during that time, the Kabaka meddles into politics. That will be the end of the kingdom. And of course, people condemned him, said, oh, you are not supposed to speak. So this brings me to a very important question. When is the church supposed to be silent? And when is it supposed to be, I cannot keep mum?
Yeah, you make reference to a very interesting letter, pastoral letter, if that is the right term. I think
it was a pastoral letter. Yes.
Pastoral letter by Archbishop Joseph Chiwanuka of, I think it was 1960.
63, 61, 63, around there.
Yeah.
The church and the state, yes.
Yes, church and the state. When you read that letter, you see a very bold leader. You see someone who had taken a stand to judge the circumstances, to judge what was happening and not remain on the fence. To guide, in fact, he clearly says it in that letter, that I, as a religious leader, I have to guide my people. I cannot simply remain quiet. In fact, there is a subheading, the second subheading in the letter. It says, it is titled, I cannot remain silent.
Yes.
And he will say, I cannot remain silent because these things ultimately affect even religious expression. What he was seeing was that Catholics were marginalized. That was one of the things. That Catholics were being marginalized because Ben Chiwanuka was associated with the Catholics and because Anglicanism had officially become the religion of yes, Buganda especially, and then later. Yeah, so he saw that religion for Catholicism specifically. But now going to the question that you ask, when do we keep quiet? When should religious leaders keep quiet?
Should we always be talking? Should we always be?
Certainly, we can't always be talking. A prudent person should judge when to talk and when not to talk. Sometimes by talking, you spoil more than you would have if you remained quiet. But sometimes by remaining quiet, by choosing silence, you allow evil to reign. Now, the question shouldn't be whether we should speak or remain silent, but just when do we remain silent? When do we speak? There is a book, sometime back I gave a keynote address at the Archbishop Chiwanuka Memorial Lectures. And at the end, the Archbishop, when he was during his speech, he said, I refer you to a book by Cardinal Sarah.
Yes.
Cardinal Sarah. The book is
The Power of Silence.
Yes, The Power of Silence.
Yes.
Yeah, in fact, he instructed someone to get it for me, but they haven't yet delivered it. I managed to find it later. But in that book, you realize that what Cardinal Sarah is talking about is the importance of silence, having a moment of silence to reflect.
Reflection and
Yes.
discernment, yeah.
Yes, that every person needs a moment when they are quiet just to think, because it's not only the root of creativity, but also a very important thing in spiritual um, discernment or reflection about who we are, what we are doing, how we can make ourselves better. But Cardinal Sarah is not talking about whether the church should be silent or not. So there are moments when you know that by speaking you're going to spoil. But there are moments where, I just have to repeat this for emphasis, where you know that by keeping quiet, you're conspiring or you're helping evil.
Conspiracy of silence.
Yes, conspiracy of silence. But second, much as silence is a language, it is a very vague language. It's an ambiguous language. It can communicate, it can go all directions. When you're silent, I don't know what you're communicating. One person will interpret your silence as support, another person interprets your silence as
negation.
Yes, or negation or as disagreement. But all of us will go with our interpretation, which means that you're facilitating even those that you think that you're being quiet about, so that they know that, oh, this person is not happy. Someone, sorry, I think it is Che Guevara, who says that silence is argument by other means. It is argument by other means, but that argument cannot be heard sometimes. There are times when you keep quiet, let's say in a home, you've had disagreements with your wife, and your wife keeps quiet or you keep quiet. I think in such cases, there can be some communication.
It's more haunting sometimes
Yes.
even.
But at a larger scale, at the scale of governance, government is doing this. They are torturing people, they are kidnapping, they are stealing money, and you're silent, you're saying, this is the best choice. What does that choice mean? There are also cases I would imagine where the church keeps quiet because they could be victimized, and maybe perhaps they are people, they could lose more people than they would have lost if they did not talk. But the irony is that it's the same church that celebrates matters. We have just celebrated Uganda matters. So I'm not saying that we should be foolhardy, or church leaders should be foolhardy to take unnecessary risks. But why should we celebrate the matters for that courage, for the bravery, for the risks that they took? Yet whenever an opportunity comes for us to take the same risks in order to stand for what is right, we run away.
Dr. Spire, I see this issue of silence, and we made reference to Archbishop Chwanuka's times. During those years, the church by and large was not being supported by government per se in terms of financial or whatever. It was the missionary era.
Yeah.
Today, you see so many church leaders. I'm listening to say almost every church leader running into government to Yambe, as the talk goes. Now, I think the compromise starts from those moments. The hand that feeds you in one way or another.
He who pays the
I
piper.
remember a cartoon, by that time you are not yet part of it, when they used to throw a Prado inside a Pajero in the mouth of of a religious leader, like that. Now, where we are expecting that government is supposed to be the service provider, and the church almost intervenes into provision of such, but we're always running to government to give us. And we're already compromising ourselves. I remember a case, hardly I think a year. I think it was a rally or something like that, when one bishop of a certain came out and said, I've got this chance also to tell you that I need a vehicle.
Mm.
So how do you relate that? I don't see that church religious leader coming out and saying, no, here, this is wrong, this is correct. And I don't know, the religious leaders speak just for the sake of rhetoric, or it is really true to their conscience that they want to guide the politicians and society at large.
Yeah, to answer that question, one, maybe I would start from the acknowledgement that certainly religious leaders, at least those who are doing the right thing, they play a very important role in society. Not just in spiritual matters, but even in development. I've seen, I'm from Masaka. At least in Masaka, I've seen how the church is really involved in transformation of people's lives through Mado and other development projects. So it's not just spiritual work, but even in building schools, hospitals.
Yes.
In fact, you notice, you observe that when the missionaries came here, it was not just the cross or building churches. They were building churches, but wherever you found a church, there was a school nearby, there was a hospital. Yeah, meaning that there was an understanding that you're not going to preach to a person who doesn't have proper health care, a person who is not educated, because ultimately all these things, as I said earlier, they affect our spiritual life. So having said that, having acknowledged the importance of the church, and where I have to add that footnote, those who are doing the right thing, because we also know that today we have churches that are simply exploitative. They just take advantage of the desperation of people to psychologically manipulate them, even to surrender the little that they have. So that would mean that it is not really bad or wrong for government to facilitate the church if the church is playing an important role in society. That would be okay. And I have no problem with government doing that. But the problem is how that facilitation, how the handouts are given. That is where the question arises, the question of voice. That when these people are treated like this, or when they are given handouts in such and such a way, will they still be able to speak? Doesn't it really compromise them to make it impossible for them to play the prophetic role that we were talking about earlier? Now that brings me to the phenomenon of gifts, the cars.
Gifts, exactly.
Yes, so for the president to give cars to religious leaders, again, that wouldn't be a wrong thing. But how it is done, you see, it is the motive and the implication, the consequences that I'm focusing on. If these cars, for instance, were put into the budget, that whenever there is a consecration of a new bishop, it is in policy that government will give them a car.
Yes.
Whenever there is a new imam or whatever, I'm just giving examples, they'll be given a car. Whenever there is a new whatever, they'll be given a car. That is okay. But when you make it arbitrary, it means that even the recipient is going to take this as a favor.
As a favor.
Because in all cases where these gifts are being given, there is no accountability where they are coming from. And the religious leaders themselves are not asking, yes, you're giving me a car, because I know that in our cultures, it is not good manners to look a gift horse into the mouth, someone to give you a dog and you start, but I think for a religious leader, specifically underlining that, given their role and what we expect of them, they should have been interested in knowing, because this is a lot of money. The cars they are given cost a lot.
Yes.
So if you're being given a car of 300 million or 400 million, you should be interested in knowing, you know, the president's salary and all other privileges. But still, with that salary, you don't expect that that's where this car is coming from. Or even if it is coming from there, at least be interested in knowing. But if it is left at the level of a favor or at a level of that vagueness where we don't know where it's coming from, that is where compromise starts from. a president who has done me a favor and given me a car, tomorrow I'm going to feel guilty naturally if I'm standing up to oppose them. Naturally,
Yeah.
I'm standing up to say, no, even they should be, we should think of changing leaders, because it's not wrong for a church leader to say that. But now you remember the car that they gave you, you remember that you were at your worst time when that car came. We did not have means of transport. And which often happens that people are made desperate, and in that desperation, then you throw them something and they look at you as a savior. Just like if you have a dog at home, you don't feed it for days and then you bring the food. It's going to look at you as a savior, but not even to ask in the first place,
why did you stab me?
Yes, yeah, and who locked me up? If I was a free dog, I wouldn't be appreciating these. So the church is in a position where maybe not all, but many of them, because in the past you would have some funding coming from, let's say, Vatican or wherever. That is diminishing. So many of the sources that were traditionally there from different donors, those who are supporting the church, it's reducing. So the church either looks at its people, the offertory, tithe, and all that, or maybe look at government. But the one who has the bigger purse is government.
It's government itself, yeah.
Yes. So if government then becomes the source that you will look at, are you going to be able to play your role?
No.
I think that's where the question is. There is a certain religious leader, maybe I can mention, it was Archbishop Semogerere when he was still bishop of, was it?
Kasanaluwero.
Yes, Kasanaluwero. He was given a car when he was consecrated bishop.
Yes.
And then he said, receiving the car, hey, I'm very grateful for this car, Your Excellency, and I'm sure where you are passed, you have seen the roads. I hope this car is going to be able to
to last the time.
yes, so
the
on those roads, but maybe also that we fix the road so that the car doesn't break. So, which was a subtle way of telling the president maybe the priority should have been the road.
The roads, other than
Yeah, so, but also on the other hand, very importantly, it's the gesture, the message that you're sending to the flock. You see, when we see religious leaders receiving these posh cars, because they are really not just ordinary cars, what do you think we are thinking? I have painfully paid taxes. Hospitals, no medicine, they are in a terrible condition, schools, but I'm seeing that it's indeed this money that is being used to buy cars for religious leaders, especially posh cars, for those who took vows to live sometimes a vow of poverty or at least simplicity.
Simplicity.
And they don't even say anything to show what, okay, I know there is a time, there was a bishop, Father Kanyike, Monsignor Kanyike. Yes.
XN151.
So the Christians were seeing the old car he was driving, and I think they thought, the man is suffering. He doesn't have money. We should buy him a car. And they donated him a car, of course, which he received gratefully, but he showed the problem was not that I'm uncomfortable with my old car. He continued driving his USN, the other one, I think later he donated it.
Donated someone else.
Yes, so that simplicity is what we expect of religious leaders. But when they are also pompous, especially at the expense of the taxpayer, and not just ending at the pomp, but also keeping quiet, where they are most expected to speak, they have this guilt or the burden of the car they were given and other things, which is blocking their mouths. That's where the problem comes in.
Thank you very much for that. On 3rd June, I'm making a quotation from Archbishop Semogere's speech to the nation at Namugongo. And this is what is stated. Let us build a nation where political competition does not become an enmity, where elections do not provoke unrest, and where leadership is measured not by power, but by service. And that's where it started from. Government is expected to be doing service to people. And he further went on and said, our democracy must heal, not harm. It must unite, not divide. We must listen, not silence. Uh, we've seen in particular countries where the church aligned or laid in the same bed with the government. And when things went bad, really, the church went to its lowest. Even within the East African region, it has ever happened. I mean, not particularly mentioned. And as we said, the church failed to play its prophetic role. Where it was supposed to be saving the people, it was the contrary. Right now, today in Uganda, we have to be open and sincere. There's a lot of talk concerning an abduction here or there, or a kidnap here or there. We hear about the so-called drones and everything. And now of late, we are talking about the basements and other things or similar. And we are going into a very hot period of elections. We have just seen some of the by-elections that were really not, it was clear on TV and everywhere. So sometimes maybe I may see it differently. The church speaks philosophically instead of being so clear. It needs a language that this is this, is this. How would you help? How would the church assist its flock? The different denominations, I don't mind whichever, not to remain divided, but at the same time as we go, because now the appeal is always, we are going to have elections, but let's remain united. Why is that appeal always there? It seems it is lingering within the mind of the. What's your take?
Yeah, I sometimes find problems with such messages, not specifically the message of the Archbishop, because I think he tried to be candid here, and we can all understand what he's pointing at given what is happening. But the messages I find problematic are those that preach peace in times of, okay, not just war, but in times of severe abuse. In times of gross abuse, we are preaching peace, and we are preaching the peace mainly to the victims. So we are saying, okay, yeah.
Why did you antagonize the police?
Yes, let's try to be calm. We have come from a long way. And I'm not saying that the church should preach violence. But when you emphasize peace in such times, you're facilitating the narrative of the oppressor. Because the oppressor often comes in the name of keeping peace. The reason why there are so many soldiers on the streets during elections, we are keeping peace. The reason why there are restrictions, this and this, internet switched off, there is a possibility of violence. That's what we are trying to mitigate. And then also the religious leaders come in to emphasize peace in the same direction. You see, there cannot be peace without justice. So our primary emphasis should be on justice.
Justice.
If you do not emphasize justice and you simply say peace, peace, even if you don't condemn, even if you don't call upon war, there will always be war. There is a song I really like by Bob Marley. It's called War, and it's adapted from a speech of Haile Selassie, where he says that not until there will be will be treated as equal, seen as equal before the law. Of course, he was talking about between those who have, those who don't have, blacks and whites, there will be a war. Not until the worth of a person is not in terms of what they have, is not in terms of their class, but in terms of being human. There is going to be a war. Meaning that you don't just have to condemn war, but try to fight all these things that would lead to instability. What are some of the things that would lead to instability in Uganda? One, that even when people try to tell you what they want, try to tell you the things that are paining them, you don't listen. Even when, when people try to choose their leaders, you steal the elections. You make it difficult even to choose the leaders that they want. when people are trying to organize in order to choose or to come up with alternative ways of governing themselves, you even make that organization impossible. You start kidnapping them, you torture them, and you start proudly talking about torture. In fact, priding in torture. And that those who are priding in torture, who are government workers who occupy very strong, important positions, no one is reining them in. No one is saying anything about them. What are you preparing for? You're simply preparing for war. So condemning war in itself is not going to stop it if you're silent about all those injustices. So not until we address injustices, the situation is going to be always ripe for war. It's going to be ripe for conflict. Again, there is another song. I really like reggae because of the messages of peace, of justice, especially that old reggae, roots rock reggae. There is a song by an artist called Peter Tosh. It's called Equal Rights and Justice. He says everyone is talking about peace, but no one is talking about justice. But there will be no peace until we get equal rights. For the person who is suppressed, the person who is trying to find alternative means of survival, maybe they go to the lake. In the lake, they are short. The lakes are monopolized by a few people. They try to go into another sector, growing coffee. You also push them out. They try to run to another sector. You make it difficult there. And then they try to organize, maybe to find alternative leadership. Again, you hit them there. You kidnap them. What exactly are you preparing for? As we normally say that even if it is these peaceful animals, a cat, try to chase it, it's your own cat, chase it wherever it goes into a certain corner, it will pull out its claws. So the church, it's important, yes, it should be preaching peace, it should be preaching unity, but what unity are you preaching when this person is seated on the other? You're not saying anything about the one seated on the other. You say, let us unite. How do I unite with the person who is torturing me?
So in short, whenever the church doesn't speak, it loses its credibility.
Yes, it's about credibility.
It's authenticity that it is really, yes, the message is authentic.
That is why something unusual is happening. Church leaders have been respectable for a while, but these days you'll find people openly abusing church leaders. Someone says something and it's all over social media. Look at this, the words that they are using. It's because people will relate to us in view of how we present ourselves, in view of what they see in us. Yes, this is a man or a woman of God. We rarely say woman of God. This is a man of God, but do we see God in what they are doing? Do we see God in what they are preaching? Why would a man of God conveniently pick those messages from the Bible that do not talk about injustices, but pick what is safe, talk about sexual promiscuity, talk about, in very general terms, love one another, but not condemning the hatred that is, yes. So when a person looks, because people are analyzing, people are keen, they will study your behavior and they study the trend over time. But this person who is talking about all this, who comes, reads John, from Matthew, from Mark, Jeremiah, but in all that Bible, they don't see anything that can condemn the injustices that are happening. So tomorrow, even when you're talking about something where you think people should listen to you,
they are not ready.
They have left. And actually, in the long run, this is affecting the church. Because when the people do not see they do not see the church in their struggles, eventually they leave. What am I there for?
Yeah, it's really such. You talked about a very important aspect of justice, peace. In fact, the church has got a department, at least the Catholic Church, that one I'm aware. It is called Justice and Peace. Whenever you say peace and justice, they say, no, it is justice and peace. Justice first, and
Mm.
then peace will prevail.
Mm.
Justice in the home,
Mm.
domestic violence. Justice over land, justice over whatever. And whenever those anomalies or whatever take place, there's lack of peace. And at the end of the day, everybody is on the. Dr. Spire, we have just a few minutes to go through this talk. We are lucky that some of you speak or artistically express yourselves. And the tendency on some of us is, no, we can't all speak. We can't all do it. Don't you think that we are doing I don't know whether I should call it a disservice, or it is designated that a few people are supposed to be speaking on behalf of the entire society?
Yeah, one, of course, in life, we have different roles to play. We cannot all be doing the same thing. Much as maybe I'm seen speaking on social media, on mainstream media, it doesn't mean that I'm doing the most. It doesn't mean that what I'm doing is the most important. I know there are people who are working quietly behind curtains. We don't see what they're doing, but they are really doing a lot about even the injustices that I'm talking about. So what I mean is not exactly about being seen to be talking or about even verbal talking, speech, verbal expression. We can play different roles, but where ultimately these roles complement each other. There is that one who will speak in church. There is that one who will mobilize people. There is another one who will educate, but the education they're inculcating is one that really empowers people to be able to express themselves. There is a teacher who will not come to the streets or not come out to talk, but they are preparing citizens who are able to defend their rights, citizens who are able to stand with the oppressed. That teacher is playing a role. But what I have a problem with is for some people to create all excuses to do nothing, to say that, well, those are things, at least for you, Spire, you're known, you can talk, but how did I get to be known? Was I born known?
Yeah.
I've been drawing cartoons for so many years, since around 2006, at least for the newspapers. But for all those years, some people have only come to know me in 2020 or 2022. But they don't talk about between 2020 and 2006 when I started drawing cartoons and writing in the newspapers. So what I'm saying is that it is a process. You make your contribution and it will build with time. So don't say that Spire has a platform. Did someone hand me the platform?
Not true.
So where did it come from? So they make it appear like this is a platform I was born with, and for them, they don't have it. Therefore, it is my duty to speak and theirs to keep quiet or theirs to simply clap.
Spectators and yeah.
Yes, in fact, there are some people who send me messages, inbox. Could you speak for us about this? And then they either start or end with, keep me anonymous. And some of the things they are trying to talk about are innocent things. They are being cheated by MTN or Airtel, but they say, keep me anonymous. Now, why does this person even want to be kept anonymous on this? So it is Spire who is the fool who is going to be putting himself there to say everything that you don't think it's worth risking for to say. So in simple terms, I'm simply saying that we can all do something. Even a tiny insect, when it bites you, you say, this insect is small, but
Just protein.
yes, but that bite, they are small organisms that contribute to our lives without even us seeing what they are doing, but they are really doing something. So it's us to first of all understand who we are, understand what we can do best, understand our advantages, our privileges, and then ask ourselves, how can we leverage these privileges and other talents that we have to be able to do something, but not always creating an excuse. They say that if you want to do something, you'll do it. If you don't want to do it, you'll find an excuse.
not doing it.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, our viewers, thank you very much. In the interest of time, of course, this is quite a very large topic, as we said, church and politics. We can't exhaust it. It is quite pertinent in our lives. It affects us every time, now and then. We are very grateful, Dr. Spire, for your time. That's part of stewardship, time, your talent, and even treasure that you are with us here. As UNCCLA listens and speaks, we look forward to the 91st episode, and we are keeping everybody alert. Please participate in the life of our country, participate in the politics by standing and by advising and advocating for the best. Thank you very much, and I wish you a very good evening. Thank you very much, Dr. Spire, once again.
You're welcome.
And wish you the best of the night. Blessed
Thank you.
Eid to everybody. Eid Mubarak tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
UCTV, good news for all.